In today's video, we are reacting to nonprofit Reddit posts. And this one that we're checking out today is from the angle of an employee who's kind of disheartened with the whole industry. This is going to be interesting looking at it from a leadership perspective.
Hey everyone, we are Ted and Lisa Snyder, and we are nonprofit consultants because we believe a better world needs healthier nonprofits. So I'm super excited. I don't know if excited is the right word. Interested. Like, I'm saying excited looking at the word disheartened. It's not great. But this post that we found is really interesting because it's written by someone who has worked in the nonprofit sector. And they're just kind of saying, like, what is happening? And they give a little bit of context. So let's just jump right into it. And we're going to take this from a leadership perspective. I know a lot of times when we look at leadership articles, this isn't a leadership post, but it's really important that we as leaders understand what's happening
and
here.
We learn from what other organizations aren't doing well. So for context, I did a 2-year direct service program out of college, and then after that, moved into working for nonprofits in management type roles. I'm currently in my 3rd organization in 3 years. Bad look, I know. I'm a job jumper, but I don't think it's me, or at least it's not primarily me based on my conversations with coworkers.
Yeah, so right off the bat, they're working in management type roles. I'm wondering if the nonprofits that they're coming into actually have managers more than leaders. Depending on your position within an organization, it can be tricky to simply be a manager who doesn't really have any ability to make adjustments within an organization, especially because generally there's way fewer people than are needed, way more need than seems like can ever be met. And so if you're just simply managing people versus walking in and saying, I am a leader within this organization and it's up to me to help make adjustments and help make this happen, that whether it's a job position or it's a mindset, that right there, I'm like, management type roles.
Well, yeah, in the nonprofit space, a lot of it is about a lot of success is determined on how well you can do more with less. And as a staff member, having a mindset that says, I'm going to just kind of manage what I've been given, like, unfortunately, that's only going to lead to like a deprecation over time of the teams and the stuff that you're doing, because nonprofit, the funds are all trying to go toward the specific mission that you're trying to accomplish, and they're putting basically as little resources as possible into operational costs, which includes staffing and includes technology and things that you need to get the job done, right? So when you walk into an organization, or as a leader, if you have a mentality that says all of my staff are managers rather than leaders, that can be detrimental over time because it doesn't give them enough autonomy to actually do more with less. They just have to do less with less.
Yep. And that can be incredibly frustrating, especially if you're bringing in people who want to see the maximum amount of impact being made, which is what happens in the nonprofit sector. In the for-profit, it's generally sales or service. In the nonprofit, though, you're looking to help as many people as possible. And so anything that feels stagnant gets frustrating.
Yep.
So as I'm currently in my 3rd organization, 3 years, bad luck, I know. I'd agree with that. I'm a job jumper. So that right there, if he or she said three organizations in 3 years because of toxic work culture, or this thing wasn't working, or the job wasn't what I expected, that'd be different. But just to label yourself a job jumper, that definitely kind of sways how I'm perceiving the rest of this post. And I don't think it's me, or at least it's not primarily me based on my conversations with coworkers. I'd be interested to know what conversations that they had with leaders within the organization. When you have someone who's constantly within your organization, always talking to the coworkers, but never bringing issues up the line or up the chain, that's something to really be looking out for, because if you're hearing someone who is constantly asking questions like, why are we doing this? Or this doesn't seem right, or being negative to other people, and they're kind of giving you a little heads up, but then the person to your face isn't bringing stuff up, that's something that needs to be addressed incredibly quickly. It's not that people can't ask questions. We need our leaders to ask us questions. Otherwise, trust diminishes over time. But If they are unwilling to bring their questions to the people who can affect change and can actually get them answered and to help get the organization moving in a better direction, that kind of indicates that they're just interested in questioning, not getting their questions answered.
Right. And I would say too, how many times have you talked to a coworker in any job and had the coworker go, "Wow, I really like our boss." Like that just doesn't happen. Even if they feel like they like your boss, it's just not a topic that really ever comes up. But the topic that comes up all the time is how much you don't like what somebody did.
Yeah.
Whether it's a coworker or a boss or, a customer that came in, right? Those conversations tend to, so the more you're kind of talking with coworkers about stuff, you just have to know that you're probably going to get an unfavorably large amount. Like it's just going to be unbalanced a little bit. And just know that that's probably just going to be the case anywhere you go. You're going to hear more negative and you're not going to hear as much positive just because of the nature.
Yeah,
of how
and
that
this
works.
is something that to address it needs to be a cultural change. Not in the toxic positivity, we only say good things around here change. But in the change where people know if you have a problem with someone, bring it to that person. So if you have a problem with your boss, talk to your boss. Simply because it's going to help your organization be able to move toward its mission quicker in a more effective way.
I would say too, as an employee in a nonprofit, you do have more leverage than an employee in like some big corporate job.
Yeah.
Generally, I mean, if it's a really giant nonprofit with a lot of like hierarchical stuff, you might not. But I think generally because of the whole idea of trying to do more with less, if you bring an issue up to leadership, I feel like they're more likely to nudge a little bit to help because they can't really afford to retrain a new person very well. So they're going to say like, "Hey, how can we help make this a better work environment for you?"
Yeah. Goes on. Each org I've worked for is plagued by a litany of problems. Yes. Correct. Always. That make it a miserable place to work. Yeah, it very well might. I'm going to say that this person might have read the situation correctly. It's the same story. Passionate, competent people working at the bottom and in the middle, but leadership is poorly suited for their positions. This actually happens on a fairly regular basis. These organizations tend not to grow super, super large, but usually large enough for people to start seeing incompetencies. And part of the reason for this is someone who starts an organization from the bottom and ends up in leadership over time, they didn't necessarily start out because they're like, I want to lead a staff, or I want to lead all these specific people, or I'm super organizationally gifted, or I understand structures and systems. Usually it's that they're a visionary and they're like, I see how I can help people. And then as they actually effectively help people, things start to grow. And pretty soon they're kind of in over their head a little bit. And if they haven't brought the right people in around them, it can really start to show like, oh, the organization looks good, but you don't know what you're doing. Or like the organization looks really good, but behind the scenes, it's just chaos. And you're running in 5 different directions and no one knows what to do. Passionate, competent people, but they might not be suited for their positions, partly because sometimes the positions end up happening more than intentionally applied for.
Right.
Like you might know their roles.
And I would say too, in the nonprofit space especially, people start out a lot of times, if they're starting an organization or if they're in leadership when it's small, it's because they have like a workhorse mentality that helps them to get stuff done. Now, the get stuff done people don't always do great at delegation, don't always do great at organization, they don't always do great at leadership. They would much rather just have no staff and just do it all themselves.
And the reason they have staff is probably because they're like, oh crap, it's too much. I should hire someone. And it's not like their first choice. It's more of their...
It just grew beyond them. They got so much donation because they did such a great job raising money and getting the stuff done early on. Now they have an overabundance of resources, but they don't have the organizational strength because they don't have like the leadership capabilities, or they haven't brought the right people to help support them, that now it's whatever. So it's not like necessarily that they're bad, right? It's just that they don't have competencies in these other areas because they're so good at getting stuff done. I remember working with a few volunteer leaders and staff in the past that were amazing, talented, workhorse individuals. But if you put them in charge of a team, the other people would sit around like kind of just like twiddling their thumbs because this person just did all the work.
Yeah.
They weren't great at delegating or getting other people involved to help.
Yeah. And this is common, not just, I mean, it's more common in nonprofit work, I would say,
Hmm.
simply because the getting it off the ground versus sustaining it are a lot of times just two very different skill sets. And if someone isn't
Hmm.
aware that they are and not bringing in the right people, it can be difficult. In a business, it's more likely that you're hiring for things. And when you hire, rather than work with volunteers or nonprofit staff, generally the job descriptions are a little bit different. The pay is a little bit different. And you're managing versus leading, which is a little bit different. So, next.
Real quick, I'd also just add one more thing too. This is a great thing for the board to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Boards generally do have people who are like, maybe running businesses or have some of those competencies. So when they're looking at the leader and they're saying like, "Hey, the organization needs to grow," this is your chance to help them get the right people around them.
Yeah, and help them see what they need to see because a
Hmm.
lot of times blinders are on and they have so much to do that they just can't get their head above water long enough to be able to make those decisions. It says they have unclear organizational priorities. Respectfully, I doubt this a little bit. I bet they're just not communicating the priorities well.
Hmm.
And they're horrible at managing people. This could very well be the case.
Yeah.
But generally, if they're a leader, they don't want to manage people. They want to lead leaders. They want people who are going to take initiative and run after it. And
Hmm.
every time managing is mentioned here, I get like the heebie-jeebies just a little bit because as leaders in nonprofit, we never looked for managers. We might look for admin,
Hmm.
but someone who just wanted to manage was not someone that we needed because of the type of work that's usually being done.
Yeah.
These bad leadership teams bring the whole organization down. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, bad leadership teams obviously have a like really detrimental effect on the entire organization, but that ends up working a lot more like a lid. So an organization is always going to be kind of fighting against the lid of its leadership,
yep,
and so this person who is, jumping from organization to organization is seeing the negative effects of an organization running at its lid.
yep. And this could be, I mean, here's the thing. Every failure in an organization is the leader's fault. Every success of an organization is the volunteer's fault. So, as a leader, yes, leadership teams affect everything and culture permeates from the top. And so if there is a lid at the top, there's going to be lids in the middle too.
Hmm.
And if it's not a constant thing, what's the lid? How are we fixing it? If that conversation isn't always happening within your organization, people in the middle of your organization who have their own lids aren't going to be aware of it. And they're just going to be constantly hitting a ceiling that other people look at and they're like, you could do this better. But because they don't know how to take a step back and look at it,
Hmm.
they're not being told to do it. They're not seeing it modeled. It just persists. And that is so frustrating for the volunteers underneath who are removed just enough to be able to see that it could be better run.
Right. So it goes on to say, "I'm passionate about the issue area I work in, but seriously starting to rethink working in this space. I'm thinking for my next role, try to move into a big corporation and doing work that's morally neutral." And I would say, in the corporate world, you're going to run into the same kinds of problems.
Yep.
However, you have to weigh the consequences because right now you're passionate about what you're doing. You care about what you're doing, which means you get up in the morning and it's the fire that gets you going, but it's also the thing that's going to get you frustrated if it's done poorly.
Yeah.
But in the corporate world, the benefit is you get up in the morning, you're like, "Ugh, I don't care about my job at all."
Yeah.
But then when you're there and something bad happens, you're like, well, at least I'm getting a paycheck. Like you don't care. You're just kind of like more like this. So if you're cool with the ups and downs, like I know I am, because I like having a reason to get up in the morning and be like, I am accomplishing something. You're still you're gonna run into more things that frustrate you because you're gonna hit some kind of lid either with yourself or with people you're working with or your boss.
Yeah. They said, I don't know. I don't want to get a job lobbying for a company, but I don't think I need my role to be mission driven anymore. And here's the thing with this. Your role is almost never mission driven. It's whether or not you personally are mission driven. If you
Hmm.
are not mission driven, but you're working within a mission driven organization, you're not going to be a good fit there.
Yeah.
And if you're mission driven, working in a neutral organization, your life is mission driven. So are you looking for a specific mission outside of yourself that you can just buy into? Are you looking for a paycheck and you have your own mission that you want to support? Are you looking for the mission because you think somehow that makes the work better? Or, I mean, what is the motivation here? Because you can work in the for-profit sector and be a mission-driven individual. We've also seen people working in nonprofit who don't care at all about the mission, but they really like the amount of influence that they're given or the social credibility that they're given because they're doing good work. So, what is it? What are you interested in and what are you looking for? The issues will persist anywhere, but whether or not you're doing something for the mission is something that you can do anywhere. As a leader, you need to know that your mission is highly important and you need to help people actually get vested in your specific mission. Because I got to tell you, people can live a mission-driven life anywhere that they go, and your mission is special, but that doesn't mean that they're automatically going to buy into it because you have bought into it. And I know as nonprofit leaders, we want to think like people have it better if they're here. No, people only have it better if they're there, if you're making it better for them.
Yep.
So mission can happen anywhere. And so, like, if you recognize I'm fine working in a non-mission area, like for a non-mission focused company, I mean, that's something that you need to consider for yourself.
Right. So a big lesson that leaders can kind of take from, nonprofit leaders can take from an article like this is thinking, how can I open up the floodgates of communication a little bit better between the staff that are surrounding me or volunteer leaders that are surrounding me? Because it's hard for you as a leader to know that this kind of stuff is going on sometimes in the organization. And it's not so that you can quash it and stamp out the rebellion, but it's so that you can know, so you can make active changes to make your organization better. So that way people are walking away and increasing the likelihood that someone's going to get together at the water cooler and be like, this organization is great.
Yeah. Now, one way that you can do this is to find staff members through having better volunteers. Because part of this is as you have volunteers, you get to have a little bit more of an inside scoop on how they act, how they fit within the culture, and how they interact with the people around them, which can be highly beneficial. Now, I know we've said a lot about this poster. I think that their intentions here are really, really great.
Yep.
And so I'm glad that they posted this. I will say as a nonprofit leader, if it's something where you're like, I want to hire people, but want to have a little bit more background on the person as I'm bringing them in so that I know that they're a good fit and they understand the nonprofit work that we're doing, we have a great video that talks about how to get more and better volunteers for your organization. It's coming up right now, and we will see you over there.